Okay, so let's take a look at the example here. We do list some rules here, but we definitely need some example of this approach. All right, so let me actually close some of these windows I have opened before. So we need to close that. I'm just going to create a new project. So this will be officially our week 9, I think, for the semester. Okay, and I've generated this main method and main class. Okay, so I could say I would like to have an integer result, which is a result of adding two numbers, right? So I can have some kind of um, um, arithmetic object construct this as new arithmetic, and then I would like to add two integers, 10 and 20, okay? And I would like to use my arithmetic object to do something like that. So I don't know what's the purpose of that arithmetic object, but supposedly it encapsulates some fancy formulas for some sort of a computation. Okay, so let's add this arithmetic object to the project, right? So we can go here and say, all right, we have some source packages here, so let's add a new class here, new Java class named arithmetic. Okay, so we create arithmetic, and we add to this arithmetic thing a method named add, right? So we have an add method, right, which takes integer left, integer right, left and right parts here. And what this method does, of course, it returns another integer, and of course we're going to make it public, right? We can make this method public, and so what it returns back, it simply returns left plus right. Right, so this is not very complicated, it's very simple, and so hopefully if everything works, if I save everything, if everything works, I can even say system.out.print and say result equals result. All right, so that should work. Let me try building this. Did I spell this right? Arithmetic. Cannot find symbol arithmetic public class. We're missing the new method, right? I mean the new operator, that's all. All right, so run this. So the result is 30, which is the result of 10 and 20. Perhaps I want to embed some business rule here. And this business rule here says that if if both left greater than 0 and at the same time right greater than 0, then, so in other words, this method works only for positive numbers. Okay, and I want to enforce the rule that both numbers should only be positive. In all other cases, there should be an error. So how can this be done? Step number one. If we would like to use exceptions in this project, we need to indicate this particular method throws an exception. And if it throws an exception, we can say arithmetic error. We can say arithmetic range error. Okay, so this is the type of exception that I would like to use in case if this condition didn't work. Okay, so here I can say else if that's not the case, right? Then I can say throw new arithmetic range exception and construct it. Okay, so if you compare it with my demonstration here initially, this box is my arithmetic range exception, right? And so it's an object which is not a surprise, is created by new. So I need to create it. So of course, the only problem that I need to solve is that I don't have this arithmetic range error, but I can create it, right? So I can go back to my my package and say new Java class, and I can create this arithmetic range error, right? Say finish. Now I have a class which is part of my package, and I would like to use it as an error handler or exception object rather, right? So what I need to do is that I need to say extends exception. This is what we're going to later call a checked exception, because checked exceptions are checked at compile time, and if we forget to use exception mechanism with a checked exception, the compiler will give us an error. So that's why part of this implementation is Java requires us to define exception classes if we'd like to use our own custom exceptions in our code. We need to derive them or say extends from the Java exception class. Okay, so and I can even add here a private string message, right? Some sort of a message, and I can have a public constructor here, which takes a string message, right? And I can even store specific error information directly in my exception. So I can say superclass, which is an exception object constructor, and I can actually pass this message to the superclass, as well as I can store, just for the demonstration purposes, I can store this message in my own object, right? So this message equals message. All right, so nothing really sophisticated. What happens here is that I have a class which is arithmetic range error. I kind of knew beforehand that it has to extend exception, and it contains some custom data attributes if I want to, right, which typically are made private, right? So now I have the constructor which takes this message, I'm using superclass constructor, which is kind of useful because you can pass this text of your custom error to the parent class. But just to demonstrate the flexibility here, I will also store this message in my own object. Now, of course, for me, in order to get my message, if I wanted to, I could provide a public getter, public get message, which returns back a string, right? And so it simply, of course, just says return message. Okay, so I think that's reasonable. So I have this, and notice that at this point, the arithmetic class, which has this simple add method, which checks left and right to be greater than 0, right? So all it does is just basically takes two alternatives. One alternative is if everything's okay, it does its thing. Otherwise, it throws new arithmetic exception. And then, of course, right now, I need to provide a specific error message because I constructed my class in such a way that the default constructor is gone. I need a specific constructor that takes a string explaining what's wrong, right? So just say, we can say here that add method failed, all right? I don't know how helpful that is, but it's just what I could, for the demonstration's sake, add here, right? So we have an exception class, which is our arithmetic range error, because we decided to name it that way. And there's also an arithmetic class, which does some useful computation, right? And so now it can essentially, it has a chance to report error by using the keyword throw. Of course, new always constructs a new object. In our case, it's the object that is the representation of our exception. And throw basically initiates this return mechanism from a method, but this time it's unlike a regular return. It will be an attempt to search for the code which can handle my exception, the exception that I just generated, all right? I just created here. Notice also that in order for this to work, because we're trying to make arithmetic range error a custom exception or exception that behaves as a checked exception, part of the rule is if you want to have a method which doesn't want to deal with this condition, it just detects that the condition is bad, but if it doesn't want to deal with that condition, rather wants to throw an exception, it has to, in its method signature or method declaration here, it needs to include the throws. So there's a throw keyword and there's also throws keyword. So the throws keyword essentially is a specifier in method declaration that tells the compiler that there is a possibility that this specific method will not return normally, but will return this specific class as an exception or object of that particular class, which is designed to be an exception. Now, of course, and now I can go to my week 9, right? And here is the, so if I save this, right, if I save all of this and go back trying to build my project, right, just say clean and build again. So the error that I am getting now, it says error unreported exception arithmetic range error. It must be caught or declared to be thrown. Okay, so what this error message tells me that you're trying to make a call into method add, which could potentially throw an exception, but you make no effort to deal with that exception, and this is not acceptable because this is the type of exception that we're trying to deal with, exception especially with objects derived from the exception class in Java library. Those are checked exceptions, and that's exactly what just happened. The compiler checked for this exception and said, you know what, you need to do some extra work in your main in order to just simply call this method.